The mockery begins. The grand chamber of the Galactic Council was alive with murmurs, the air thick with the arrogance of the most powerful species in the known universe. Towering figures of alien dignitaries sat in their high seats, their robes shimmering with the insignias of ancient civilizations. They had gathered here for an important discussion, yet their expressions showed anything but seriousness. Instead, they were amused, entertained even. At the center of the chamber, standing alone on a circular platform, was Ambassador Elias Carter, a human representative from Earth. He stood tall, his posture calm, his gaze unwavering. But around him, laughter echoed, mocking laughter. A Telvoran delegate, his insectoid mandibles clicking together, leaned forward with a smug expression. "And what, pray tell, does your tiny, insignificant species have to offer in this council?" His voice carried through the hall, dripping with condescension. Another alien, a reptilian warlord from the Jurassic Empire, hissed in amusement. "Perhaps they wish to teach us how to build primitive fire." He turned to his peers, and they erupted into laughter again. Elias did not react. He had expected this. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, a species that had only recently achieved interstellar travel. To these ancient, powerful empires, Earth was nothing more than a young and fragile civilization, barely worthy of notice. The chairman of the Galactic Council, an elder being from the revered Vorathi species, raised a hand to silence the laughter. His translucent skin shimmered under the grand lights of the chamber. "Enough. The human ambassador has requested the floor. Let us hear what he has to say, if it is worth our time." Elias finally spoke, his voice steady, measured. "Esteemed council members, I come here not to beg for favors, nor to seek your pity. I come with knowledge. Knowledge that, I assure you, will change everything you think you know." This statement caused a ripple of mild interest, but most of the council remained unimpressed. A member of the Yorgethi, a race of scholars who prided themselves on their vast historical knowledge, scoffed. "Knowledge? What could your primitive kind possibly know that we do not?" Elias allowed a small smile to form. It was not a smile of amusement, but one of quiet confidence. He reached into his diplomatic case and carefully pulled out an ancient leather-bound tome. The book was old, impossibly old, its cover marked with symbols that had not been seen in the galaxy for millennia. The moment the aliens saw those symbols, the entire chamber fell silent. The Excelvoran delegate, who had mocked him moments ago, stiffened in his seat. His many eyes blinked rapidly, his mandibles twitching. The Jurassic warlord leaned forward, his reptilian pupils narrowing. The Yorgethi scholar, who had spoken with arrogance, suddenly looked horrified. The silence stretched on for several tense moments. Then, in a low, almost whispering voice, the Vorathi chairman finally spoke. "Where did you find this?" Elias placed the tome on the platform before him and flipped it open. Inside, the pages were filled with strange, intricate writing, a language long thought to be extinct, a language that should not exist anymore. He ran a finger across the text, then spoke. But when he did, it was not in English. It was not in any language known to humanity. It was their language, the forgotten, sacred tongue of an empire that had ruled the stars before even the council itself was formed. And yet, humans should not know it. The sound of those words sent a visible shiver through the gathered aliens. Some gasped. Others recoiled. A few whispered in hushed, fearful tones. The Yorgethi scholar's voice was barely above a breath. "This is impossible. This language was lost thousands of years ago. No one remembers it. No one speaks it anymore." Elias looked up, his eyes cold and knowing. "No one speaks it anymore." He turned the page and spoke again, more fluently this time. The words rolled off his tongue effortlessly, like a long-lost melody being played after centuries of silence. The Jurassic warlord slammed his fist on the armrest of his chair. "Enough. You will stop speaking those words." His voice was filled with something that no one had ever heard from him before. Fear. Elias looked around the room, observing the reactions. the most powerful species in the galaxy, some of them warriors who had conquered entire star systems, were shaken. A slow smile formed on his lips. He leaned forward and said, in their own forbidden language, "Tell me, what are you so afraid of?" The chamber was now dead silent. The mockery had ended, and in its place, a cold, creeping terror had begun to settle over the council. The grand chamber of the Galactic Council remained silent. Too silent. Moments ago, the room had echoed with laughter, filled with the mockery of powerful alien dignitaries who saw humanity as nothing more than a primitive race. But now they sat frozen in their high seats, their eyes locked onto the human before them. Ambassador Elias Carter stood at the center of the chamber, calm and unshaken. The ancient tome lay open before him, its pages filled with symbols that should not exist. Symbols of an extinct language that, by all logic, no human should ever be able to read, let alone speak. And yet Elias had spoken it, fluently. The reaction from the council was immediate and intense. Fear, shock, disbelief. Even the most powerful empires in the galaxy were visibly shaken. The Yorgethi scholar, once so arrogant, was the first to break the silence. His tentacle-like fingers trembled as he pointed at Elias. You cannot possibly know this language. It is impossible. This tongue has been lost for thousands of years. Even we, the keepers of history, have only fragments of it left. Elias turned a page in the tome, his fingers tracing the ancient text. He spoke again, his voice steady, measured. But this time, he did not ask questions. He recited. A passage from the book, a forgotten verse, its meaning lost to time. And as the words flowed from his lips, the reaction from the council was immediate. A Vorathi elder, his translucent skin shimmering with unease, gasped aloud. The Drassic warlord, once amused by humanity's presence, now gripped his throne so tightly that his claws cracked the armrests. The XL Voran delegate, usually unreadable behind his insectoid eyes, took a step back. Elias stopped speaking, his gaze sweeping across the chamber. "You recognize these words," he said, "don't you?" The chairman of the council, a being whose wisdom spanned millennia, exhaled sharply. His voice, once powerful, now carried the weight of something deeply unsettling. This language, the chairman finally spoke, was not just lost. It was erased. Purged from the galaxy, its speakers wiped from existence. No records were meant to remain. No one was meant to remember. He leaned forward, his ancient eyes dark with something dangerous. How does a human know this? Elias closed the book, allowing the weight of the moment to settle before he responded. "We did not find this language by chance," he said. "We did not stumble upon it in some ruin. We did not steal it from forbidden archives." He let those words sink in before delivering the final blow. "We have always known it." A cold silence settled over the room. The very air felt heavy. The Yorgethi scholar visibly recoiled. "Lies. Your species is young. There is no possible way humans could have preserved knowledge that even the oldest races in this chamber have forgotten." Elias tilted his head. "Is it really so impossible?" He gestured at the book. "Your records were lost. Your history was erased. You forgot your own past. But what if someone else didn't?" The Drassic warlord slammed a fist against the table. "Enough games, human." His reptilian eyes burned with suspicion. "Are you claiming that humans hold knowledge from before the Galactic Council even existed? That your kind has access to something that even we, the oldest empires in the stars, do not?" Elias smiled. "I'm not claiming anything," he said. "I am simply showing you the truth." The chairman of the council studied Elias for a long, tense moment. Then, in a slow, deliberate motion, he turned to the assembled delegates. "Leave us," he commanded. There was a murmur of confusion. The council chamber had never been emptied in the middle of a session before, but no one dared question the order. One by one, the lesser dignitaries and aides left. until only the highest-ranking members remained. Elias did not move. When the doors finally closed, the chairman fixed his gaze upon him. "There is only one reason a language would be erased from history," the chairman said, his voice heavy with meaning. "Only one reason the most powerful empires of old would seek to destroy every trace of it." His ancient eyes darkened. It was dangerous. Elias said nothing. He simply waited. The chairman exhaled. "Tell me, Ambassador of Earth, do you know why this language was forbidden?" Elias met his gaze, and when he spoke, his voice was calm. "I do." The tension in the room became unbearable. The most powerful beings in the galaxy now sat at the edge of their seats, waiting for his next words. Elias took a slow breath. Then, with deliberate care, he spoke once more in the forbidden tongue. And this time, the walls trembled, the council chamber shuddered. The air itself seemed to vibrate as Elias spoke in the forgotten tongue. It wasn't just a language, it was something more. The ancient walls, crafted from metals older than the council itself, groaned under an unseen force. The lights flickered. A few delegates staggered back, their bodies trembling as if something deep within them was responding to the words. The Yorgethi scholar collapsed to one knee. His elongated fingers clutched his chest, his face twisted in a mix of awe and terror. The Drassic warlord's eyes dilated, his breath coming in ragged gasps, as though his very instincts were screaming at him. The Excelvoran delegate, whose species was known for their emotionless nature, emitted a series of high-pitched clicks, a sound of pure distress. Elias stopped speaking. The moment his voice ceased, the room fell into an eerie silence. The walls stopped trembling. The lights stabilized. But the damage had already been done. The chairman of the council sat rigid in his seat, his ancient eyes locked onto Elias. He no longer looked like a ruler. He looked like a man who had just glimpsed something he was never meant to see. "How?" the chairman whispered. His voice, once strong, was now weak. "How do you possess this power?" Elias took his time before answering. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each delegate. They were afraid, and they had every reason to be. "This is not just a language," Elias said. His voice was steady, calm, controlled. "It is something far greater." The Drassic warlord growled. "Explain." Elias nodded. He placed a hand on the ancient tome before him, his fingers lightly brushing the worn pages. "You called this language lost," he said. "You said it was erased from history, but you never asked why." He let the words hang in the air. "I will tell you." The delegates listened in absolute silence. This language, Elias continued, was not just spoken by the ancients. It was woven into them. It was not just words, it was a command, a force, a power so great that those who understood its true nature could shape reality itself. A cold realization spread through the room. The lost language was never just a language. The Yorgethi scholar shook his head in denial. "That is impossible." Elias smiled slightly. "Is it?" He turned a page in the tome and spoke a single word. The massive doors of the council chamber slammed shut. Not by technology, not by motion sensors. They moved on their own. The Vorathi elder gasped. The Drassic warlord drew his blade. The Excelvoran delegate took a full step back. Elias looked around, waiting for them to understand. He didn't need weapons. He didn't need an army. He had something far more powerful. The chairman inhaled deeply. "This cannot be," he murmured. "The old empire, the rulers who came before us, they purged this knowledge. They feared it." His voice dropped to a whisper. They feared those who could speak it. Elias met his gaze. "And now," he said, "you understand why." The chamber remained deathly still. The Yorgethi scholar spoke first, his voice shaky. "If this language is truly as powerful as you claim, then how is it the humans possess it? How could a species as young as yours possibly hold knowledge that predates the council itself?" Elias considered his words carefully. Then he spoke the truth. "Because we did not forget," he said, "because while the rest of the galaxy erased it, buried it, and feared it, we preserved it." The chairman's face went pale. The Excelvoran delegate's mandibles twitched in shock. The Drasic warlord clenched his fists, his claws drawing thin lines into his chair's armrests. "You mean to tell us," the chairman said slowly, "that humans have always known?" Elias exhaled. He locked eyes with the most powerful rulers of the galaxy, and he nodded. Yes. Silence fell once more. But this time, it was not the silence of disbelief. It was the silence of realization, of fear. For the first time in their existence, the most powerful beings in the universe understood something they had never considered before. Humanity had never been weak. They had simply been waiting. The chamber was silent, but the air was thick with unspoken fear. The most powerful leaders in the galaxy, the ones who had mocked humanity, who had seen them as nothing more than an inferior species, were now staring at Elias with wide, uncertain eyes. Because now they understood. Humans had known the ancient language all along. The chairman of the Galactic Council sat motionless, his ancient fingers curled into the armrests of his throne-like seat. His breathing was slow, controlled, but his eyes betrayed the storm raging within his mind. The Drasic warlord, whose species prided itself on dominance, tightened his grip on his ceremonial blade. His claws dug into the hilt, but he did not speak. For once, a Drasic warrior had no words. The Excelvoran delegate, usually unreadable behind his insectoid features, let out a series of rapid clicks, a sound that translated into something close to panic. It was the Yorgethi scholar who finally broke the silence. His voice was shaky, uncertain, as if even speaking felt dangerous. "This," he whispered, "this cannot be true. If it is, then everything we know is a lie." Elias leaned forward slightly, placing his hands on the ancient tome before him. "Not a lie," he said, "just incomplete." The chairman finally exhaled, his gaze still locked onto Elias. "Explain," he commanded. Elias nodded. He had expected this. He had been preparing for this moment ever since he first set foot in the chamber. He took a slow breath, then spoke. "The galaxy believes that the ancient rulers, the ones who came before your council, vanished thousands of years ago. That their knowledge, their power, and their language were lost." He glanced around the chamber. "That belief is wrong." The Drasic warlord growled. "Then tell us the truth, human." Elias smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The truth," he said, "is that they did not vanish." He let the words sink in. They were erased. A heavy silence followed. The Excelvoran delegate clicked rapidly in alarm. The Yorgethi scholar shook his head in denial. The chairman's fingers dug deeper into his armrest. Elias continued. "The ones who ruled before you, the civilization that built the first empires, that shaped the early galaxies, were feared even by their own descendants. They wielded something greater than technology, greater than military strength." He tapped the tome lightly. "They wielded the power of this language." The Drasic warlord bared his teeth. "And you expect us to believe that your species, a race barely out of its infancy, has somehow preserved this knowledge? That you alone hold the key to what even the greatest rulers of the past could not control?" Elias chuckled. It was a quiet, knowing sound. "No," he said, "I don't expect you to believe me." His eyes darkened. "I expect you to fear me." The room tensed. The chairman inhaled sharply. The Yorgethi scholar took a step back. Even the Drasic warlord's claws twitched. Elias let his words settle before continuing. "You see, the real reason the ancient rulers were erased was not because they were too powerful. It was because they refused to use their power." He looked directly at the chairman. "They chose peace, but those who came after them feared what they could do, so they destroyed them. They erased their language, their history, everything." He let that revelation sink in. But humanity, he said, voice steady, was different. The Excelvoran delegate hissed. How? How could your kind have this knowledge? Elias tilted his head slightly. Because when the ancient rulers were being destroyed, some of them knew what was coming. They saw the purge before it happened. And so, they did the unthinkable. He smiled. They hid their knowledge. They scattered their teachings, buried their words in forgotten places. He tapped the tome. They sent their last records to Earth. Shock rippled through the room. The Drassic warlord slammed his fist against the table. Lies, he roared. Why would they do such a thing? Elias met his gaze, unblinking. Because they saw something in humanity that they had not seen in any other species. He leaned forward. They saw the will to survive. The warlord's rage faltered. Elias continued. Your empires were built on conquest, on control. But humans, we were forged in chaos, in wars, in struggles, in hardships beyond measure. And through it all, we adapted. We endured. The ancient rulers knew that if their knowledge was to survive anywhere in the galaxy, it would be with us. A long silence followed. The chairman's face had lost its color. The Yorgethi scholar was trembling. The Drassic warlord, for the first time in his life, looked uncertain. Elias exhaled slowly. That is why we still speak their language, he said. That is why it still flows through us. When all others have forgotten it, he let his voice drop to a whisper. And that is why you should be afraid. The Excelvoran delegate clicked wildly in alarm. If this is true, he said, then humanity is not just another species. You are something else entirely. Elias gave a slow, deliberate nod. We are, he said. And now that the truth is known, the galaxy will never be the same. The battle had been raging for hours. The once proud alien fleets, sure of their victory, were beginning to falter. They had underestimated the human resolve. And now they were paying for it. Ships that were once seen as easy targets were fighting back with surprising strength. The humans had shown no fear, no hesitation. They fought with a ferocity that made the aliens question everything they had once believed. On the bridge of the flagship, General Marcus stood firm, his hands gripping the rail in front of him. His crew was working tirelessly, but it wasn't easy. The alien forces had sent waves of their most advanced ships, and the human fleet had already taken heavy damage. Yet, despite the odds, the humans were still pushing forward. We've got them on the ropes, Marcus muttered to himself. His voice was calm, but there was a fire in his eyes. They're not used to this kind of fight. Beside him, his second-in-command, Captain Lila, was studying the screens, her fingers flying over the controls. The enemy is trying to regroup. They've suffered more losses than they're willing to admit. But we need to finish this, now. The alien forces were beginning to panic. Their commanders, once full of confidence, were now scrambling to regroup. The reports from their front lines were grim. Ships that had once seemed invincible were now burning in space, their massive hulls torn apart by the humans' relentless attacks. We can't let them get away, Lila said, her voice laced with urgency. If we let them retreat, they'll only come back stronger. Marcus nodded, his eyes hardening. No retreat. We finish this now. All ships, prepare for a final assault. The human fleet, battered but unbroken, began to charge once more. The alien forces, still reeling from their unexpected losses, were struggling to mount an organized defense. The human ships were relentless, firing their weapons with precision and fury. The aliens had never seen anything like it. Their pride had been shattered, and now they were starting to realize that this wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for their very existence. As the battle drew on, the human ships closed in on the alien flagship. It was the heart of their fleet, the symbol of their power. If the humans could take it down, it would be a devastating blow. General Marcus knew this was the moment that would decide the outcome of the war. "Target the flagship," he ordered, his voice low and determined. "Give them everything we've got." The human ships shifted their fire, locking onto the alien flagship with laser precision. The alien commanders, realizing their vulnerability, tried to issue orders to protect their flagship, but it was too late. The human fleet was closing in too quickly. Braced for impact, an alien officer shouted across their communication channels, "They're coming for us." But no amount of scrambling could save them now. The human ships unleashed a devastating barrage of fire, their weapons punching through the alien flagship's defenses. The massive ship began to shake, its outer hull cracking under the pressure. Explosions rocked its core, and the once mighty vessel started to fall apart. The alien forces watched in horror as their flagship was torn to shreds. The pride of their fleet, their symbol of superiority, was crumbling before their eyes. The human fleet wasn't just fighting. They were dismantling their entire empire piece by piece. "We can't hold them off much longer," one of the alien generals said, his voice shaking. He had never imagined that this would happen, not in a million years. They're too strong." In the chaos of the battle, the human fleet pressed on. The alien ships began to retreat, but it was too late. The humans had them cornered, and the fear in the alien commander's eyes was palpable. What they had once thought was an easy victory was now slipping through their fingers. General Marcus watched from his command chair as the alien flagship's final defenses collapsed. His heart raced, but his face remained calm. This was it, the moment they had all fought for. The humans had turned the tide of the battle, and victory was within their grasp. "All ships, prepare for the final strike," Marcus ordered, his voice steady and filled with resolve. The human fleet, battered but unyielding, made their final assault on the alien forces. The alien ships, once so sure of themselves, now scattered in fear, trying to escape but finding no safe route. The humans had them trapped. "Prepare for boarding," Captain Lila said, her eyes flashing with determination. "Let's show them just how far we've come." With a final push, the humans launched their boarding pods, infiltrating the alien ships and taking control. The once mighty invaders were now at the mercy of the humans they had mocked and underestimated. As General Marcus watched the battle unfold, he allowed himself a moment of quiet pride. The aliens had thought they could crush humanity. They had laughed at their strength, at their resolve. But now, as their ships burned in space and their forces crumbled, the humans had proven that they were not to be underestimated. The tide had turned, and the aliens were about to learn the hard way that they had awakened a force far more dangerous than they could ever imagine. The mockery was over. The humans had won. The chaos in space was overwhelming. The alien fleet, once so confident, was now scattered in a panicked retreat. Their once proud warships were burning, and their elite soldiers were being overrun. On the bridge of the human flagship, General Marcus stood tall, his eyes focused on the screens in front of him. The battle was far from over, but the aliens were broken. "General, we've taken control of most of their ships," Captain Lila said, her voice filled with relief. "The remaining forces are retreating, but they're trying to regroup at the edge of the system." Marcus nodded, his mind already racing ahead. "We can't let them escape. If they regroup, they'll come back stronger. We need to finish this now." The remaining alien forces were regrouping on a massive, heavily armed Fortress-class ship, their last hope. It was heavily shielded with firepower that could wipe out entire fleets in a single strike. If the humans didn't act fast, the aliens could launch a devastating counterattack and turn the tide once more. "We're going after their fortress," Marcus said decisively. "All ships, prepare for the final assault. This is the end." The human fleet, battered but resolute, turned toward the alien stronghold. The remaining alien ships, now desperate to protect their fortress, tried to form a defensive line. The human fleet had already taken heavy losses, but their will to win was stronger than any enemy's firepower. "They're trying to form a barrier," Lila observed, watching the alien ships positioning themselves in front of the fortress. It's going to be tough to break through. Then we'll do what humans do best. Adapt, Marcus replied, his voice unwavering. Take out their weak points. Focus all fire on their flanks. The human ships advanced, moving with precision. Every commander in the fleet knew that this battle was the one that would define their place in history. There would be no second chances. This was the moment of truth. As the human fleet approached, the alien fortress fired its first volley. The energy beams sliced through space with a terrifying force, striking the closest human ships. Several ships were hit, their hulls shuddering under the pressure, but they didn't stop. The humans fought through the barrage, pushing forward with everything they had left. The alien fleet began to fire in unison, their weapons flashing across the battlefield. But the humans, with their fierce determination, managed to dodge and weave through the fire. They were relentless, their ships moving like shadows, always one step ahead. This is it, Lila said, her voice tight with anticipation. We're about to hit their weak points. The fortress won't hold for long. Keep pushing, Marcus ordered. We'll break them. The human ships concentrated their fire on the alien fortress's exposed flanks, their weapons striking with deadly accuracy. The explosions that erupted were deafening, lighting up the darkness of space. The fortress's shields began to crack under the pressure, its once impenetrable armor beginning to show signs of weakness. We're making a dent, one of the officers reported. Their shields are weakening. We have a chance. But the alien fortress wasn't going down without a fight. It unleashed its full might, firing devastating energy blasts from its core. The blasts slammed into the human fleet, ripping through their defenses. Several human ships were destroyed in the blast, but the others pressed on, pushing through the smoke and debris. Keep going, Marcus shouted. We're almost there. The human fleet was closing in. The alien fortress was nearly crippled, but it still had enough firepower to destroy the remaining human ships if they weren't careful. It was a race against time. Either the humans would break through and destroy the fortress, or the aliens would have one last chance to turn the battle in their favor. The human ships drew closer, and Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the moment. With a final push, the human fleet focused all their firepower on the fortress's exposed core, unleashing a barrage of weapons that shattered its remaining shields. The fortress trembled as explosions tore through its massive hull. The alien forces inside the fortress fought desperately to regain control, but it was too late. The fortress's core exploded in a brilliant flash of light, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The remaining alien ships, now leaderless and in disarray, began to scatter, their once proud fleet reduced to chaos. Victory, Lila whispered, her eyes wide as she watched the alien ships fall apart before her. It's finally over. General Marcus stood silent, his eyes fixed on the wreckage of the alien fortress. The human fleet had paid a heavy price, but they had done it. The aliens who had once laughed at humanity's strength, who had mocked their resolve, were now fleeing in fear. We did it, Marcus said softly, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. The galaxy will know that humans are not to be underestimated. But even as the human fleet celebrated, there was no joy in Marcus's heart. This victory had come at a great cost, and the galaxy would never be the same. The aliens had been defeated, but the galaxy was vast, and new threats would rise. Humanity had proven its strength today, but the future was uncertain. One thing, however, was certain. Humanity was no longer the underdog. The tide had turned. As the last remnants of the alien fleet disappeared into the darkness, Marcus looked out at the stars. There was still much to be done, but for now, humanity had won, and they had earned their place in the galaxy. The battlefield was silent. Where once there had been chaos, fire, and destruction, now there was only the wreckage of war. The remains of the alien fortress drifted through space, its once mighty structure reduced to nothing but debris. The surviving alien ships had fled, Vanishing into the vastness of the galaxy, their once arrogant confidence shattered beyond repair. On the bridge of the human flagship, General Marcus stood tall, his gaze fixed on the burning remains of the fortress. The battle was over, but the weight of victory pressed heavily on his shoulders. They had won, against impossible odds, against overwhelming numbers, against an enemy that had mocked their strength. And yet, the cost had been high. Captain Lila approached, her uniform torn, her face streaked with sweat and exhaustion. "We've confirmed it, sir," she reported. "The alien fleet is in full retreat. Their chain of command is broken. They won't be a threat anymore." A murmur of relief passed through the command crew. They had fought harder than ever before, had lost comrades, had faced death head-on. And now, at last, they stood victorious. Marcus exhaled slowly. "Send the message to all ships," he ordered. "Let them know. We've won." Across the human fleet, the message spread. Cheers erupted from every surviving ship. Soldiers embraced. Engineers, covered in grime and sweat, raised their fists in triumph. Medics continued their desperate work, tending to the wounded, knowing that every life saved was another reason to celebrate. But Marcus knew that this was just the beginning. The aliens who had once mocked humanity would not forget this day. The galaxy would not forget this day. The name of humanity, once ignored, once belittled, would now be whispered in awe and fear. The species that had been considered weak had just brought an empire to its knees. "We need to be ready," Marcus said, turning to Lila. "There will be consequences. The galaxy won't ignore what happened here." Lila nodded grimly. "They underestimated us once. They won't make that mistake again." Marcus stared out into the void, his thoughts racing. Humanity had fought for survival, had bled for its right to exist, and had proven itself beyond doubt. But power always invited new enemies. The galaxy was vast, and other empires, other forces, would take notice. Some would fear humanity. Others would see them as a challenge. But for now, they had won. And they had sent a message that could never be erased. As the human fleet turned towards home, leaving behind the ruins of their enemies, Marcus allowed himself one final thought. "The mockery began with them," he murmured. "But in the end, we were the ones who laughed last." And with that, humanity stepped into a new era, no longer the underdog, no longer the weak ones. Now, they were a force to be reckoned with.